Today's project is an easy right angle weave focal bracelet. All of the supplies are listed in the description box. This design features red wildfire, which is also in the description box. So let's get started. You're going to use 24 inches of the red wildfire and go ahead and thread your beading needle onto the end and thread on 4 6mm bicones. You're going to pull those all the way down to the end of your wildfire, leaving yourself about 5 inches of a tail, and you're going to tie these into a circle just by putting 2 good knots in your wildfire. So there's what you've got. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. Now you're going to take your needle and you're going to thread back through all 4 beads just to reinforce the strength of your cord. Okay, now as you can see, you've got a tail coming out one of your beads. And we're going to leave this tail. You can sew this back into your design whenever you feel like you are ready to get it out of your way, or you can wait until the very end to sew it back in, but we're just going to leave it for now. And on the opposite side of our little square of bicones, I'm coming out of this bicone across from the bicone where my tail is. Okay, so I'm coming out away from me. Now I'm going to pick up 3 bicones, and I'm going to thread my needle back through this bicone in the same direction that my thread is exiting. You'll see we've created another little grouping that's sharing this center bicone. So my cord again is coming out of the center. Now I'm going to stitch through the top bicone and then this side bicone with my needle. Okay, now I'm exiting with my cord coming towards me. Okay, I'm going to pick up 3 more bicones, and this time I'm going to enter this bicone from the back in the same direction that my cord is exiting the bicone. Pull that tight, and we've got a nice little grouping of beads again. Now I'm going to stitch through the bottom and the side, coming out where we're going to share another bicone with our next grouping of beads. Okay, so my wildfire is exiting away from me. I'm going to pick up 3 more bicones, and I'm going to thread my needle through this bicone here in the same direction as my thread, where my thread is exiting. Pull that tight. So I'm going to, our 4th little grouping, I'm going to thread my needle through that top bicone. You want to pull tight as you're going. Keep the tension pretty even as you're going along. And now we're exiting down here on the bottom, whoops, of this bicone. Okay, we're going to pick up our last 3 bicones, and we're going to thread through that bicone in the same direction that our thread is exiting and pull that tight. So now we have our last grouping of our bicones. And at this point, I'm going to take the rest of my thread and I'm going to thread back through the entire little piece just to reinforce and pull tight as I go. Okay, now I've stitched back through the piece 2 times just to kind of strengthen the weave, and you can tell it's not nearly as flimsy as it was before I had gone back through. Okay, so I'm exiting this bead here. It really doesn't make any difference where you're exiting. I don't like to finish up on the end, so I continued around one more time, and I'm actually going to use my thread and my needle to tie a half hitch knot onto my thread. This is kind of difficult to see on camera, but I'm just looping the thread through itself, just like so. You can do this once or twice if you want to, just to tie your thread off, and then you're going to stitch back through a couple more beads just to kind of pull that knot in before you trim this off. Okay, I don't like to cut my thread where I have tied my knot. And again, at this point, it doesn't matter where you're exiting. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take my needle off. My thread is exiting here, and I'm going to use my Wildfire Cutter to come in and zap off that remaining thread. Okay, and now I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to thread it on to my tail, and I'm going to weave my tail back in a couple times, and then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to zap off the end of it with my Wildfire Cutter. Okay, now that we have taken care of our loose ends on both sides, our little piece is free and we're ready to move on to the next step. I'm going to take a 3-inch piece of 22 gauge wire. I'm using tarnish resistant silver, and I'm going to take it and I'm going to very carefully thread it through one of the end bicones. Just like that. Okay. So now I'm going to take my wire and I'm going to bend one end that direction. Okay. And I'm going to take the other end and bend it this direction. So we've crossed our wires just like so. Now I'm going to take my chain nose pliers and I'm going to bend one of those wires straight up, and I'm going to come back in here where you can see, sorry about that. I'm going to take this other wire and I'm going to wrap it around once, and to do that I like to hold on with my chain nose pliers just so I have a nice grip. So I'm going to take this wire and I'm going to wrap it around the wire that's sticking up one time. Okay, and actually I'm going to do 1.5 because I want it to come back towards the back. Okay, now I'm going to take my cutter tool and I'm going to go ahead and trim that off. So now all I have is this top wire. I'm going to take my chain nose pliers, I'm going to grab that wire right above where I have made that wrap. Okay, I'm going to bend my wire 90 degrees. Just like so. We're going to make a nice wrapped loop. So I'm going to come in with my chain nose pliers, grab that wire. I'm going to take the wire up and over the barrel of the pliers and bring it around. So you can see I've got a nice little loop, and I'm going to go ahead and wrap the rest of the wire around that straight section there. To do that, I'm going to hold on with my chain nose pliers, and I'm actually going to use a second pair of pliers just because this is a short piece and I don't want to get in the way with my fingers. So I'm going to wrap that around, and I'm going to make those wraps as many as it takes to meet that first wrap that we made. Okay, when you get finished, this is what you should have. We're going to take our second piece of wire and we're going to do the exact same thing on the other side. Just going to go ahead and make a matching wrapped loop on the other end. Okay, once you've got your wrapped loops on either end, you're ready to add your chain pieces. So I am just going to come in and attach a 6mm jump ring to one of those loops that we just created. And before I close that jump ring, I'm going to thread on a piece of 2-inch chain. And I'm going to close my jump ring. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Add my other section of chain. Okay, now I'm ready to add a jump ring on either end and my clasp. For the clasp, I'm using a heart-shaped lobster clasp. The link for those are in the description box. Now at this point your bracelet can be finished, but just for a little extra, I like to take some charms, just some extra beads, a cute little charm that I've added, and I've added all of these to another 6mm jump ring. I'm going to take that 6mm jump ring and I'm going to attach it to one of the jump rings that is attaching the chain to our wrapped loop, just to add an extra little dangle. And that's it, your bracelet is done. Got a cute little dangle, really pretty focal, and your long pieces of chain. Or I made a couple of these exactly the same way, but instead of using chain, I used some pieces of leather instead. Here, let me zoom out just a little bit. So really, you could use whatever you wanted to for the long pieces of your bracelet. I hope you enjoyed. Thanks.